Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin today's lesson with a little truth that might sting for a moment, but I promise it will serve you for a lifetime. Most people don't have a consistency problem. What they have is an honesty problem. They're honest about what they prefer, but they're not honest about what they're committed to. And that gap between preference and commitment is where dreams quietly die. People will say, Jim, I want to change my life. And I say, I believe you. But wanting isn't the real issue. Wishing is easy. Wanting is easy. Commitment now, that's where the price must be paid. And one thing I learned early in my life is this. If you don't pay the price for success, you will most certainly pay the price for regret. And regret, my friends, has the highest interest rate in the world. Now, I'm not here to criticize you. I'm here to wake you up. I'm here to share with you a truth that changed my life when I was a young man struggling with broken promises to myself. And here it is. Life is not designed to give you what you want. Life is designed to give you what you deserve. And what you deserve is determined by the disciplines you practice, the choices you make, and the habits you repeat. You see, most people don't fail because they lack knowledge. They don't fail because they lack opportunity. They fail because they keep waiting for a better feeling instead of making a better decision. They keep telling themselves, when things calm down, when I feel motivated, when the timing is right. But let me give you a little piece of wisdom. If you wait for the perfect moment, you will wait for the rest of your life. So today, we're going to talk about a subject that looks simple on the surface but determines everything about your future consistency. Why it's so hard for most people. Why motivation keeps letting you down. Why your life can change dramatically the moment you stop relying on moods and start relying on principles. And why every breakthrough, every single one, begins with a decision, not a feeling. Because here's the truth. You already know what to do. You've known for years. The problem isn't information, it's implementation. The world is overflowing with tips, tools, hacks, strategies. What people really lack is the discipline to do the simple things every day, long enough to see the miracle. So as we begin today, I want you to remember this line. A few simple disciplines practiced every day can change your entire life. Not the dramatic, not the extraordinary, just the consistent. Let's explore why so few ever get there. Now, let's get into the harsh truth why most people never become consistent. And believe me, it's not because they're not smart enough or talented enough or deserving enough. No. Most people never become consistent for one simple reason. They underestimate the power of neglect. Let me explain what I mean by that. Neglect is a silent enemy. It never shouts. It never knocks on your door. It never warns you ahead of time. It just waits and grows. You skip one day and nothing happens. You skip 2 days and still nothing dramatic. You skip a week and life looks the same. But here's the catch. Neglect doesn't show its damage immediately, only eventually. And by the time you notice it, the cost is enormous. You see, most people don't fail because of catastrophe. They fail because of accumulated neglect. Just a little too much waiting. Just a little too much comfort. Just a little too much. I'll start tomorrow. And before long, a little becomes a lot, and suddenly a decade has slipped away. Here's another major reason people never become consistent. Comfort masquerading as logic. Oh, comfort is clever. It will whisper very reasonable excuses in your ear. You're tired. You've earned a break. You can catch up later. And it sounds right. It feels right. But comfort, if you're not careful, will steal your entire future one small excuse at a time. Most people don't say, no, I won't do it. That would at least be honest. No, what they say is, I'll do it later. But let me tell you something. Later is the most dangerous word in your vocabulary. Later is the language of average. Later is how people build a life they never wanted. And then we come to another problem. Hesitation. People hesitate because they're waiting to feel ready. Waiting for motivation. Waiting for the perfect moment. But I learned early that if you start with feelings, you will fail before nightfall, because feelings are like the weather, unpredictable, unstable, and constantly shifting. If your consistency depends on how you feel, you'll only take action 2 days out of the month, maybe 3. Let me give you a little contrast, because I love contrasts. There is a world of difference between knowing and doing. The library is filled with people who know, but the world is shaped by people who do. You can read all the books. You can watch all the videos. You can take all the notes. But until you take consistent action, nothing changes. You're rehearsing success instead of living it. And that brings us to a truth most people avoid. Human nature is not discipline. Human nature is drift. If you do nothing, you won't stay where you are. You'll drift backward. Life does not keep you in place. Life pulls you toward average unless you fight your way toward exceptional. Let me give you a story. It's one I've told many times. I once met a man who kept telling me, "Jim, when things calm down, when my schedule clears up, when life gets a little easier, then I'll get serious." And that was his speech for 10 years. 10 years he waited for life to calm down, and 10 years later, guess what? Life had not calmed down. In fact, it was more chaotic. He was more behind. His dreams were further away. And the saddest part? He still believed the same story. You see, if you wait for life to calm down before you get consistent, you'll wait forever. The problem isn't the storm, it's the story you keep telling yourself about the storm. So, why do most people never become consistent? Because they let neglect grow. Because they let comfort deceive them. Because they wait for feelings to cooperate. Because they confuse knowledge with action. Because they drift instead of design. And here's the truth that will save you years of frustration. Consistency doesn't begin when life gets easier. Consistency begins when you decide you're done waiting. Now that we understand the problem, let's move to the real foundation. Why motivation keeps failing you, and why philosophy is the only thing that lasts. Now that we understand the problem, let's move to the root of the issue. And this, my friends, is where most people miss the mark entirely. They keep trying to fix inconsistency with motivation when the real solution has always been philosophy. Let me explain. Motivation is a spark. Philosophy is a furnace. Motivation gets you started. Philosophy keeps you going. Motivation lifts you for a day. Philosophy shapes you for a lifetime. You see, most people treat personal growth like a fireworks show. They want the excitement, the explosion, the rush of energy. So they attend a seminar, watch a video, listen to a podcast, and for a few hours, they feel unstoppable. They say, "This is it. This time I'm really going to change." But then the spark fades. And when the spark fades, so does their discipline. Why? Because motivation doesn't change your life. Philosophy does. Your philosophy is simply the way you think about life, your beliefs about effort, time, discipline, reward, struggle, habits, possibility, and your life always moves in the direction of your strongest philosophy. Most people think their problem is lack of motivation. But what they really lack is a strong enough philosophy to carry them when motivation dies. Let me give you a few examples. If your philosophy says, "I need to feel inspired before I take action," you'll never be consistent. Because feelings are unreliable. Feelings are inconsistent. Feelings don't care about your goals. But if your philosophy says, "I take action because I decided to, not because I feel like it," now you have something you can build a life on. Now you're anchored. Now you're stable. Now you can grow. If your philosophy says, "A little won't hurt," you'll neglect the small disciplines. And neglect, as we learned, is a slow disaster. But if your philosophy says, "Small steps, repeated daily, create massive results," you won't skip the small things anymore. You'll value them. You'll protect them. You'll practice them. If your philosophy says, "Hard things are punishments," you will avoid difficulty. But if your philosophy says, "Hard things are training," you will lean into challenge. You will grow from resistance. You will see struggle as preparation, not punishment. Now, here's one of the greatest lessons my mentor, Mr. Schoaf, ever taught me. He said, "Jim, don't start with the head. Don't even start with the hands. Start with the philosophy. Because if your philosophy is right, the results will find you." You see, there are 4 levels of change. Philosophy, the way you think. Attitude, the way you feel. Actions, the way you behave. Results, the life you create. And here's what most people do. They try to change the results without changing the philosophy. They try to build a mansion on a cracked foundation. But a weak philosophy cannot support a strong life. It can't support discipline. It can't support consistency. It can't support growth. Your philosophy is the architect of your destiny. Your philosophy is the designer of your future. Your philosophy is the boss of your behavior. Let me give you a simple analogy because I love practical examples. If you plant a seed in poor soil, it doesn't matter how much sunlight or water you give it, the seed can't grow because the soil is wrong. You must fix the soil before expecting the harvest. Your philosophy is your soil. Your habits are the seeds. Your results are the harvest. If the soil is poor, the harvest is poor. If the soil is rich, the harvest is abundant. So the question today is not how motivated are you? The question is, how strong is your philosophy? Because once your philosophy changes, your entire life changes with it. You stop relying on motivation. You stop depending on mood. You stop negotiating with comfort. You stop making excuses sound intelligent. Instead, you start living by principles. And principles, once adopted, don't change with the weather. So if motivation is the spark, philosophy is the firewood. If motivation gets you going, philosophy keeps you going. If motivation is an event, philosophy is a lifestyle. And it is only when your philosophy shifts that you finally reach the turning point, the moment where a real decision is made. And that's where we're heading next. What a real decision actually looks like and why it changes everything. Now, let's move to what I believe is one of the greatest turning points in anyone's life, the moment you make a real decision. And let me tell you, a real decision is very different from what most people call a decision. Most people think deciding is the same as wishing, but a wish is something you say with your mouth. A decision is something you prove with your life. My mentor, Mr. Schoaf, once told me, Jim, a decision is the day you stop looking for options. That's when I learned that a real decision eliminates the escape routes. A real decision burns the bridges back to average. A real decision says, I'm done negotiating with myself. This is the line. This is the standard. This is the direction. And from that moment, life begins to respond differently. Let me give you a simple truth. Nothing changes without a decision. And once you decide, everything changes. Most people never reach consistency because they never reach decision. They reach preference. They reach desire. They reach intention. But they never reach decision. Let's break it down. A wish says, I hope. A want says, I'd like to. A decision says, I will. And the world doesn't respond to wishes or wants. It responds to, I will. A real decision has 3 characteristics. Let me share them with you. 1, a real decision removes your escape routes. You stop giving yourself a way out. You stop entertaining the idea of going back. You stop telling yourself, if it gets tough, I'll quit. No. Once you've decided, backward is no longer on the menu. 2, a real decision creates immediate action. Not next week. Not after the excitement wears off. Not after the perfect plan is built. Right away. It could be something small, writing the first page, taking the first walk, saving the first dollar. But a real decision always shows up in action. If you haven't acted, you haven't decided. 3, a real decision introduces new standards. Once you decide to live healthier, junk food stops being an option. Once you decide to build wealth, impulse spending loses its appeal. Once you decide to wake up early, the snooze button becomes your enemy. Decisions create standards, and standards create consistency. Now, let me give you a story, because stories make principles come alive. Years ago, I met a man who told me, Jim, I'm going to turn my life around. He said it with passion, with sincerity. But the next day, nothing changed. A week later, nothing changed. A month later, still nothing. Why? Because he had made no decision. He made a declaration, but no decision. He expressed a desire, but he didn't alter his standards. And without standards, life stays the same. Here's the irony. Most people are one decision away from a completely different life. Not 100 decisions. not 1,000. Just one. The moment you decide, life starts rearranging itself. People come into your life, opportunities appear, ideas flow, energy rises, momentum forms, because life moves in the direction of your decisions, not your wishes. You see, a real decision is a trigger for consistency, a trigger for discipline, a trigger for transformation. And here's the best part. You don't need the perfect plan to decide. You don't need all the answers to decide. You don't need to feel strong to decide. You just need to decide. And once you do, the how begins to reveal itself. But without the decision, even the best plan won't help you. So ask yourself today, have I really decided, or have I just been hoping? Because once you've truly decided, something powerful happens. You begin practicing the small disciplines that eventually lead to big results. And that's exactly where we're going next. How small, simple, daily disciplines become the foundation of a transformed life. Now that we've talked about the turning point, the moment of real decision, let's move into the heart of personal transformation, the practice, the daily disciplines. The small behaviors that don't look like much in the moment, but build into something extraordinary over time. I learned early in my life that success is not one big leap. It's a lot of little steps. Small disciplines practiced consistently create big results. Small neglects practiced consistently create big disasters. Most people underestimate the power of small. They say, Jim, reading 10 pages won't change my life. And I say, you're right. Reading 10 pages a day won't change your life today, but 10 pages a day for a year? That's 3,650 pages. That's a dozen books, and 12 good books can change your life. It's not the 10 pages. It's the discipline. Let me give you a philosophy. You are not practicing actions, you're practicing becoming a certain kind of person. When you exercise daily, you're not training your muscles. You're training your identity. You're training the part of you that says, I keep my promises to myself. When you save a little money every month, you're not just building a bank account. You're building discipline. You're building respect for your future. You're building the ability to say, I will not spend my tomorrow for the pleasure of today. When you study a new skill every evening, you're not just learning, you're multiplying your value. And the marketplace pays for value. Now, here's why small disciplines work so well. 1, they remove resistance. The smaller the task, the lower the friction. You don't argue with yourself over 5 minutes of reading. You don't negotiate over a 2-minute cleanup. You just do it. And when you remove negotiation, you increase consistency. 2, they create momentum. Small wins build confidence. Confidence builds action. Action builds progress. Progress builds belief. Belief builds identity. And identity, once formed, makes discipline automatic. 3, they compound. One small improvement seems meaningless, but compounded over time, it becomes powerful beyond imagination. The same way a single penny doubling becomes millions in a month, a single discipline doubling in consistency becomes an unstoppable force. And the opposite is also true. A small neglect repeated becomes a major loss. Missing 1 workout doesn't matter. Missing 5, now you have a new habit, just not the one you wanted. That's why I always told my audiences, don't miss twice. Missing twice is the beginning of a pattern. Patterns build lives. Patterns build failures. Patterns build successes. So if you want to change your life, here's a simple rule. Start with 1 discipline and master it. Not 10, not 20. 1. Most people fail because they try to change everything at once. And when everything is important, nothing is sustainable. Let me give you a small list of Rohn-sized disciplines that can change your life. Read 10 pages a day. Review your goals every morning. Walk for 10 minutes. Save a small percentage of every paycheck. Clean 1 corner of your environment daily. Write in your journal every night. Small, simple, sustainable, life-changing. You may say, Jim, that doesn't look like much. And you're right, it doesn't. But neither does a seed. A seed doesn't look like a forest. But it has a forest inside it if you plant it and tend to it daily. Consistency is the water. Consistency is the sunlight. Consistency is the cultivation. Let me share another philosophy. It's not what you do once in a while that shapes your life. It's what you do every day, not the intense effort, the repeated effort. Anyone can work hard for a week. Few work consistently for a decade, and that's why few experience the kind of extraordinary life most only talk about. So the question is, what small discipline are you willing to practice today? What small habit will you begin that, if repeated long enough, will make you unrecognizable 1 year from now? Because the practice of small disciplines is the foundation of greatness. But there's one more truth we have to face. Just as small disciplines shape success, small enemies destroy it. And that's where we're heading next. The silent forces that tear down consistency from the inside. Now that we've talked about the power of small daily disciplines, we must look at the forces that quietly, silently, almost invisibly work against you. And these forces, these enemies, don't show up with alarms or warnings. They show up as whispers, as habits, as patterns so familiar that most people don't even recognize it. If you're not aware of them, they will steal your consistency. And if they steal your consistency, they will steal your future. Let me give you the first one. Enemy has you. Neglect, the slow poison. Neglect doesn't arrive with thunder. It arrives with a shrug. Just today, it doesn't matter. Skipping once won't hurt. I'll catch up later. But here's the lesson. Neglect starts as an infection and ends as a disease. Let me tell you, it's the smallest neglect that becomes the biggest regret. Don't let it slip. Don't let it slide. The price of neglect is always paid in the future, and the future charges interest. Enemy, #2, excuses, sophisticated lies you tell yourself. Excuses often sound intelligent. They sound logical. They sound reasonable. But they are lies in disguise. An excuse is simply a story that protects your comfort at the cost of your potential. People say, I don't have time. I'm too tired. It's not the right moment. It's harder for me. Every excuse gets a little more believable the more you repeat it. But here's a Jim Rohn truth. If you argue for your limitations, you get to keep them. Enemy #3, bad associations, the influence you didn't notice. One of the greatest lessons in life is this. You become what you surround yourself with. If you spend time with people who criticize, you will complain. If you spend time with people who settle, you will settle. If you spend time with people who drift, you will drift. You see, you don't have to join the easy crowd, but if you stay around them long enough, you become them. Your environment shapes your behavior. Your behavior shapes your habits. Your habits shape your future. Choose your company wisely. Your consistency depends on it. Enemy #4. The need for applause, external approval addiction. Oh, this is a dangerous one. Some people can only work if someone is watching. They can only be consistent if someone notices. They can only continue if someone praises. But here's the truth I learned early. If you need applause to begin, you will quit the moment it stops. Consistency is built in private long before it's rewarded in public. The great ones don't work for applause, they work for identity. They don't say, will people see me? They say, will I respect myself? Enemy #5, emotional decision-making, letting feelings run the show. Feelings are wonderful, but feelings are terrible leaders. If your consistency requires perfect mood, perfect weather, perfect energy, you will never build anything remarkable. You must learn to act independent of emotion. Consistency does not ask, how do you feel? Consistency asks, what did you decide? A disciplined life is built on decisions, not emotions. On principles, not preferences. On commitment, not convenience. And remember this, the direction of your life changes the moment you stop waiting for your emotions to cooperate. Why? These enemies matter. You see, you don't lose consistency overnight. You lose it in quiet ways, in small choices, in unguarded moments, in surrendered standards. These enemies don't break down the door. They slip in through the cracks. But here's the good news. Once you know your enemies, you can defeat them. Once you recognize the pattern, you can break it. Once you understand what destroys consistency, you can protect consistency. And speaking of protection, that leads us to the next crucial part: how to renew yourself when life gets tough, when circumstances shift, and when discipline feels heavy. Because consistency is not built in perfect conditions. It's built in the storms. Now that we've uncovered the enemies of consistency, let's talk about something absolutely essential: renewal. How do you stay consistent when life stops cooperating? Because let me tell you, life has a habit of disrupting even the best laid plans. And here's what I want you to remember. Consistency is not built during the easy days. Consistency is built during the inconvenient days. Anybody can stay disciplined when life is smooth. It's when life gets rough that winners are separated from wishers. Let's walk through the principles that keep you anchored when everything around you tries to pull you off course. 1. Don't wish for easier, wish for better. One of my favorite philosophies is very simple. Don't wish it was easier, wish you were better. It changes everything. Most people think the problem is the difficulty, but the difficulty is not the enemy, it's the opportunity. You don't build character in comfort. You build character in conflict. Instead of praying for lighter loads, pray for stronger shoulders. Because if the challenge improves you, then the challenge was a gift. 2. Understand the seasons of life. Life comes in seasons: winter, spring, summer, fall. Each one has a purpose. Winter teaches resilience. Spring offers opportunity. Summer demands protection. Fall gives the harvest. Now, you must understand, there's no escaping winter. Winter comes to us all. Illness, stress, loss, delay, disappointment. But here's the good news. Winter is not a punishment. Winter is preparation. And the greatest secret of the seasons is this: no season lasts forever. Winter never beats spring. Spring always follows winter. So when life gets tough, don't quit, prepare. Strengthen your roots. Deepen your philosophy. Tighten your habits. Clarify your values. Winter is when champions are built. 3. Simplify. Don't complicate. When life becomes overwhelming, your consistency will collapse under complexity. So during hard times, narrow your focus. Don't try to maintain 10 habits. Keep 1 or 2 alive. Keep your routine simple enough to survive. Because 1 habit kept alive is better than 10 abandoned. Simplify to stay consistent. 4. Use your why like a compass. When discipline feels heavy, you must return to your purpose. Maybe you want to change for your health. Maybe for your family. Maybe for your peace. Maybe for your future. Write down your why. Read it every morning. Review it every night. Your why keeps you moving when the how gets difficult. And remember this truth: a person with a strong enough why can endure almost any how. 5. Restart without guilt. Let me tell you something many people never hear. You can begin again. You don't have to punish yourself for falling off track. You don't have to spend 3 days feeling bad. You don't have to wait for Monday or the first of the month. Just restart. The faster you restart, the faster you rebuild momentum. Failure isn't falling down. Failure is refusing to rise. 6. Align habits with your reality, not your fantasy. Some people try to maintain routines that don't match their life. They expect perfection in imperfect circumstances. Consistency doesn't require perfection. It requires adaptability. If you're tired, shorten the routine. If you're stressed, simplify the task. If life is chaotic, reduce the load. Don't abandon the mission. Adjust the method. Winners don't quit. Winners tweak. 7. Treat obstacles as teachers. When something blocks your progress, don't ask, "Why me?" Ask, "What can I learn from this?" Every obstacle carries information. Every setback contains instruction. Every struggle hides a strategy. Obstacles become stepping stones. When you learn instead of complain, remember, the obstacle is not the barrier, it is the bridge. 8. Use renewal rituals. Throughout your journey, you must periodically renew your mindset. Here's a simple weekly ritual. Reflect on the past week. Identify one win. Identify one weakness. Identify one adjustment. Realign with your why. It takes 10 minutes, but it keeps your spirit alive. Consistency fades when reflection disappears. Renew your clarity, and your consistency returns. Why renewal matters. Consistency is not a straight line. It's not a perfect streak. It's not an unbroken record. Consistency is a relationship with your goals, with your habits, with your future. And like any relationship, it requires renewal. When life gets hard, you don't abandon the path. You reinforce your commitment. Because the truth is this: hard moments don't break consistency. Lack of renewal does. And when you learn how to renew yourself, you gain the power to do something extraordinary, to keep going when most people stop. And once you keep going long enough, something remarkable begins to happen inside you. A shift, an internal transformation, an identity change. And that's exactly where we're heading next. How consistency turns into identity, and how identity creates a life you once believed was out of reach. Now we come to one of the most profound truths in personal development, a truth that separates temporary change from lasting transformation. Consistency becomes effortless the moment it becomes part of your identity. Let me put it another way. You don't stay consistent by trying. You stay consistent by becoming the kind of person who is consistent. This is the great internal shift. This is the moment your life stops being controlled by moods and starts being controlled by meaning. This is when discipline stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like alignment. Identity is powerful. Identity is magnetic. Identity pulls your behavior in its direction. If you believe you're a healthy person, you gravitate toward healthy choices. If you believe you're a disciplined person, you naturally keep promises to yourself. If you believe you're unreliable, you prove yourself right without even trying. Here's the truth. Your identity always acts before your intention. You behave according to who you think you are, not what you tell yourself you want. So the real question isn't, how do I stay consistent? The real question is, who do I believe I am? Let's walk through how identity shifts happen. 1. Identity begins with small self-promises. The fastest way to upgrade your identity is to make a promise to yourself and keep it. Not a big promise, a small one. Walk for 5 minutes. Read for 10. Save $5. Do the one thing you said you'd do. Because every time you keep a promise, you cast a vote for a new identity. And if you keep enough promises, the vote becomes permanent. You no longer try to be disciplined. You are disciplined. You no longer try to be reliable. You are reliable. Identity is built through evidence, your own evidence. 2, identity grows through non-negotiables. Most people make everything negotiable. I'll wake up early if I feel like it. I'll work out if I have time. I'll study if my day goes well. But people with a strong identity have non-negotiables, actions they take regardless of mood, weather, chaos, or convenience. A non-negotiable says, this is what I do because this is who I am. Winners don't rise to the level of their feelings. They rise to the level of their standards. And your standards are simply your identity written in daily behavior. 3, identity is reinforced through environment. You can't build a disciplined identity in a chaotic environment. You can't build a growth identity in a low-standard environment. You can't build a focused identity in a distracting environment. Your environment must match your identity. If you want to become the kind of person who reads, your books must be visible. If you want to become the kind of person who trains, your shoes must be ready. If you want to become the kind of person who saves, your spending triggers must be removed. Environment doesn't just support identity. It accelerates it. 4, identity strengthens with association. Let me remind you of a philosophy I often taught. You become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If the people around you treat discipline casually, your identity will weaken. If the people around you treat consistency as optional, your habits will erode. But if the people around you honor discipline, guard their habits, grow intentionally, and maintain high standards, your identity will rise to match them. Association builds identity, the same way wind shapes a tree. 5. Identity solidifies through reflection. A consistent identity does not grow by accident. It grows through reflection, the simple act of reviewing your decisions and learning from your patterns. A 5-minute nightly review can transform your life. Ask yourself, did I honor my promises today? Did I act according to my values? Where did I fall short? What will I adjust tomorrow? Reflection is not criticism. It is calibration. It keeps your identity aligned with your intentions. 6. Identity becomes permanent through repetition. You can fake motivation. You can fake enthusiasm, but you cannot fake repetition. Repetition becomes rhythm. Rhythm becomes ritual. Ritual becomes identity. And once identity takes hold, action becomes natural. At this point, consistency no longer requires effort. It requires maintenance. And maintenance is far easier than creation. Let me give you a metaphor. When you first start pushing a car, it takes enormous effort to make it move. But once the wheels are turning, momentum does half the work. Identity is momentum. It carries you through days when emotions would fail you. It lifts you when motivation disappears. It sustains you when challenges arise. Identity is the engine behind consistency. Why identity matters. Without identity, consistency is a battle. With identity, consistency is a behavior. Without identity, discipline feels heavy. With identity, discipline feels natural. Without identity, growth feels forced. With identity, growth feels inevitable. Once you see yourself as the kind of person who follows through, you follow through. Once you see yourself as the kind of person who keeps promises, you keep promises. Once you see yourself as the kind of person who grows, you grow. This is the quiet transformation that most people miss. Consistency flows from identity, and identity flows from decisions, and decisions flow from philosophy. But this journey is not complete yet, because even with identity, even with philosophy, even with discipline, your life cannot change without one more thing: action, execution, movement, proof. And now we move to the final chapter, the conclusion that ties all the principles together. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've traveled quite a distance together. We've talked about the problem, the root, the turning point, the practice, the enemies, the renewal, and the identity. But now we arrive at the part of the journey where everything changes the moment you accept responsibility for what comes next. Because after all the lessons, all the principles, all the philosophies, here's the truth that stands above them all. Nothing happens until you happen. Your life doesn't change because you listened to a lecture. It doesn't change because you felt inspired for a moment. It doesn't change because you wrote down a few notes. Your life changes when you decide to apply what you heard. When you turn principles into practices. When you turn philosophy into discipline. When you turn promises into identity. You see, the future is not something you wait for. The future is something you shape. Let me say that again. The future is something you shape. 5 years from now, you will arrive. The question is, where? As who? With what habits? With what standard? With what results? And that answer does not belong to the economy. It does not belong to your boss. It does not belong to your past. It does not belong to luck. It belongs to you. It has always belonged to you. When I was a young man, my mentor, Mr. Schoaf, gave me a simple question that changed my life. He said, "Jim, if you don't like how things are, then change it. You're not a tree. You can move. You can grow. You can decide. You can discipline. You can transform. You can become the architect of your own story." Most people wait for the world to change. The few change themselves and the world responds. Most people wait for motivation. The few rely on philosophy. Most people start with emotion. The few start with decision. Most people talk about change. The few become the change. And that difference, just that difference, creates two entirely different lives. So here is my challenge to you. Don't let the next 5 years look like the last 5 years. Don't drift. Don't delay. Don't negotiate with comfort. Don't make the mistake of saying, someday I will. Someday is not a day on the calendar. Someday is a thief. Someday is the graveyard of dreams. Someday is the excuse of the average. Start today. Start small. Start consistently. But start. Because if you really start, your life will begin to shift. People will come into your life. Opportunities will appear. Ideas will spark. Discipline will strengthen. Identity will transform. And consistency, true, powerful consistency, will become your way of life. And one day, you'll look back and say, I didn't get lucky. I got consistent. And consistency changed everything. So as we end this lesson, let me leave you with one final thought. It isn't what you heard today that will change your life. It's what you do when this session is over. The pen is in your hand. The page is blank. The next chapter is waiting. Now, the responsibility is yours.